African Dialogue, a talk show where we cover anything and everything.
Well, thank you for joining us on our second day of the Sustainability Week, hosted here by the city of Tshwane in Pretoria. And we're entering into the second day of this conference. We were here yesterday. The forum was starting yesterday, and in attendance we had even the African Union Commission here, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, in partnership with a leading environmental media and sustainability company, Alive to Green. It has a lineup of seminars and public lectures. Now, furthermore, the city of Tshwane is also expected to launch the Tshwane Green Economy Strategic Framework. This framework is an eco-visionary masterpiece and encourages a resilient and resource-efficient city that creates jobs and stimulates economic growth and sustainable development. Well, today we're going to be looking at maybe taking the conversation we did yesterday. We're looking at how do we create eco-friendly cities, how do we link previously colonized, disadvantaged communities into our urban cities. But today we're going to look at efficiency, look at how do we create a culture of sustainability within corporates and within the government. Joining us, we have Dora Ndeo, who's the Chief Sustainability Specialist in the Office of the Tshwane Executive City Mayor, as well as Jaishila Rajput, who is the founder and CEO of Tomorrow Matters Now. Now, I want to start this conversation with you, Dora, this morning, looking at the issue of this incorporation of awareness in sustainability and a green culture within government. I mean, we're talking about the city of Tshwane incorporating these ideals of green culture. What does your role kind of do? What do you do as a chief sustainability specialist in the office of the Tshwane Executive City of Mayor? Kind of a unique title there.
Okay, thank you very much. What we mainly do is act as a catalyst. We are based in the office of the executive mayor, so which gives us really the muscle to oversee all business operations of the city. So mainly integrating sustainability principles in everything that we do, making sure that the way in which we do service delivery is different. Is ensuring employment generation and new industry creation. We are also in a good position to forge innovative partnerships. So we partner with business, we partner with NGOs, various organizations, mainly to ensure that the city's face, the way the city looks, really changes. So in the next, by 2030, we've got what we call Vision 2030. We aiming to see a very different kind of city, a city that is self-sustaining, that generates its own energy in a sustainable manner, that manages its water resources effectively, that manages its waste effectively, moving away from landfill sites and so on and so forth. So we have the unit has been established in 2013, so in a very short space of time, we've really managed to streamline a number of programs that are being implemented in the city.
Well, we'll come back to some of the programs. Let me move to you, Jaishila Rajput. Tell us a little bit more about Tomorrow Matters Now. Tell us a little bit about what your company does and why you're here at this particular forum.
So Tomorrow Matters Now is a management consultancy that focuses on sustainability and specifically the business of sustainability. Our target and mission is to make sure that sustainability is part of business as usual. It isn't something on parallel on the side, but fully integrated in terms of our business making decisions. For us, what we focus on predominantly is developing innovative business models to be able to actually change the status quo.
It's very interesting that we're speaking about this whole green culture. It's a big word now, this whole green economy narrative and sustainability. They're terms that are now used frequently, even in spaces where the green culture is not even incorporated. What are the signals to ensure that a company or government is actually enforcing a green culture within it? What would be the parameters or the indicating factors to show that, hey, this company is actually moving in the right direction?
This is something that was a specific point of concern for us. What we've seen globally was sustainability and focus on green it led to quite a number of issues, particularly around greenwashing, where it was more of a marketing campaign than anything else. So consequently, what we found is that companies tended to start to shy away from making the work that they're doing public. In terms of specifically what we would look out for is we start out with basic principles. We start out with, are they focusing on getting their house in order? Are they putting basic, simple, sustainable principles in place to ensure that they are working with water, energy, and a number of their resources much more efficiently? Once they have this, do they extend it beyond their borders into their supply and value chain in turn? And then finally, are they investing in their leadership? Because it's really pivotal as they manage to bring these basic principles into play, they need to be able to take it to the next level. And for that, that means that their leadership has to be actively engaged on this topic. So those are the three main things that we look for from our side.
And in terms of municipalities and offices and how they conduct themselves, coming back to you, Dora, how do you ensure that the message that you're trying to create, this new way of doing business, this way of actually facilitating programs, how do you actually take that message down to project managers, to the ordinary worker within municipalities to ensure that they actually enforce it? Because you can have a person within municipality making 100 copies and throwing them away, and that's not a green culture. How do you enforce that on an ordinary municipal worker, that kind of culture?
Okay, yeah, I mean, thanks for that. It's very clear that one can't do what you cannot measure. So where we started is working out what we call a sustainability index. So where we had key indicators of what we mean by a sustainable space, whether it be in the office or at home or within a business sector. So moving from the way in which we manage our waste to the way in which we deal with our water, lighting, and so forth. So in Tshwane then we developed what we called a green outreach program that's got about 6 elements. The first of which is Tshwane Green Service Delivery, and that's where we are looking at the municipality itself, the leaders within the city as well as employees. So we then designed key initiatives and activities that must happen: waste separation at source within offices, switching off lights, and so on and so forth. We then also have Tshwane Green Business. So where we've partnered with the Tshwane Business Forum and a number of other businesses in defining what it is that you need to do within your space. If you are an automotive industry, this is what needs to be happening and where can we partner. We've got Tshwane Green Homes. Actually on Saturday and Sunday, as part of Sustainability Week, we've got a Green Home Fair at Brooklyn Mall. So where we are just showing householders what to do at home for you to be green. So there's quite a number of things that one can do. We've got another exciting one called Tshwane Green Soul. Tshwane Green Soul focuses on an individual. What can I do as a person outside a particular system in order to ensure that I'm green, whether it be walking instead of driving to a particular place. So we are mainly giving directives to each and every member. So we even have Tshwane Green Schools as well, where we work with a number of schools. We have on Saturday the 27th, we have the Green Economy Dialogue with the youth at Tshwane University of Technology. Okay. So where we are dealing with institutions of learning from basic education to higher learning. So in the program that we have, we are touching on each and every point to make sure that each and every citizen of Tshwane, where they find themselves, whether it be a municipal employee, a business sector, a school, or a religious community, we've got very good initiatives with faith-based organizations as well. So where you are sitting, you know exactly what it is that you need to do in this particular area.
Well, you're looking at a very comprehensive approach. But coming back to you, Sheila, we hear what Dora is saying. Kind of Tshwane is looking at this comprehensive outreach to communities, to schools, to business, what's happening within their own municipality. But are CEOs buying into this green economy thinking?
This is something that's quite a difficult topic. It's something that's really in the beginning stages as far as South Africa goes. There are juxtapositions. On the one hand, there's the need and drive as far as sustainable reporting goes, or integrated reporting. It's something that the JSE here in South Africa is a leader when it comes to reporting, making it mandatory that all listed companies on the JSE are publishing integrated reports. But it has to go beyond. a historical record. It has to move beyond this. And so consequently, what we actually look at is we start to look at how can we make it a lot more proactive for them. So one of the things that we're looking at is that we don't look at programs in isolation. So the minister mentioned this quite successfully in terms of how Tshwane is handling this, that it's not in isolation. So as a consequence, if we see that we can move sustainability into the business model where it makes sense from a rands and cents perspective, that's helping to actually drive it in a South African perspective. Together with that, the current energy crisis that we face puts sustainability front and center, particularly when it comes to the topic of renewable energy. For us, when we look at this, this means that from a business CEO perspective, if we can be able to drive sustainability into the value chain, turning issues into opportunities, that's something that makes CEOs wake up and pay attention to this. That's really how we see it from a South African perspective. But it's really very much in the beginning. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's a little bit of catch-up that we need to play with other countries around the world. China is an example of this, for the sense that they've been driving a lot of things as far as governmental initiatives and programs go. They have clear targets behind that, and they have a clear directive and push from the Chinese government. This is something where we need to be able to leverage this, because with growth, and as with the current growth that we have in play, it means that, or projections, it means that we need to actually be able to focus on how do we successfully handle topics like greenhouse gas emission and still be able to grow successfully. So it is I think, a topic on CEO's agenda, but we have to make sure that it's front and center as part of business as usual, and that's one way to be able to push it successfully. The problem is that a number of times when we look at topics along the lines of sustainability, we look at CSR and CSI, and that's equated with sustainability. And a lot of companies, not all companies, but a number of them, look at it almost as a throwaway in terms of what kind of donation or charity work that you can do. And there's definitely a place for that, but it should be much more beyond this.
You are listening to Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance. Thank you for listening to us. If you are listening to us on your shortwave service, it's on the frequency 9625 kilohertz on the 31 meter band to Southern Africa. Well, if you're listening to us via DSTV, you're listening to us on the Bouquet channel 902. Thank you for joining us there. Thank you for also streaming us live on www.channelafrica.co.za. That's www.channelafrica.co.za. We're still right here at Sustainability Week, hosted by the city of Tshwane. We're right here and still looking at the issues of sustainability. How do we create that environment within industries, within government? And just joining us, we have Doran Dale, who's the Chief Sustainability Specialist. I like that title. That's kind of a very futuristic title in government. Chief Sustainability Specialist in the office of the Tshwane Executive Mayor. And we've got Jaishila Rajput, who's the founder and CEO of Tomorrow Matters Now. We'll continue this conversation. I want to look at the issues of challenges. We're having high prices of electricity. We're having some problems when it comes to issues of excess of electricity in itself, and also just improving services. We spoke about this yesterday, the issue of excess. How does sustainability actually create a space where we can actually afford these services, daily services like water, daily services such as electricity? How do we create a new culture of saving? How do we create a new culture as well from government of and corporate sectors of actually informing and disseminating the right information to ordinary people like you and I? We're going to take a quick break. Well, you are listening to Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance. This is African Dialogue. You're with me, Benjamin Mushata. I'm reminded that African Dialogue comes to you every Monday to Thursday at 1100 hours Central African time. If you're listening to us via your DSTV bouquet, that's on Channel 902. Thank you for joining us there. Remember that you can also stream us live on www.channelafrica.co.za. Today, we continue speaking about sustainability. We're back at the city of Tshwane, and we've been speaking to Doran here with Chief Sustainability Specialist, Tshwane Executive City Mayor Office, and we've also have the founder and the CEO of Tomorrow Matters Now, and that is Jaishela Rajput. Also joining us now, we've got Professor Peter Newman, who is from the Curtin University, and he's the director of the Curtin University Sustainability Policy Institute Faculty of Humanities. And thank you for joining us, Professor Newman.
Thank you.
Now, we were talking about, the culture of the green economy within the basic sectors, within the government, and whether we're actually having enough momentum in terms of CEOs, directors, government officials. Is the message actually being carried by leaders? Are we seeing that transformation of thinking from the top down?
Well, I gave a talk yesterday which is called Climate Change, the Good News.
Okay.
Because what I do is look at cities around the world and how they're changing. And they are changing very quickly. So there is leadership happening. And what I've seen here is pretty strong. But what is driving it is much more the market, the banks, the finance companies. These are the ones who are now seeing that we have to phase out coal and we have to phase out oil, which means doing power differently and doing transport differently. So we collect data on whether that's happening or not, and the good news is it's happening much quicker than we thought, and it's a lot cheaper than we thought.
And in terms of that particular aspect, are people starting to realize that, hey, different methods are cheaper and they're more sustainable? Is that the thinking?
Well, it's a bit time of transition. So if you are just adding it in now, very quickly, it can be more expensive. If you're putting PVs on the rooftops of houses, it might be a bit more expensive. But overall, it's getting down cheaper so quickly that, for example, in my city of Perth, 1 in 6 households have now put PVs on their roof in the last 3 years, which is equivalent to one plan for that. It just was being done by ordinary people who wanted to create a better future for their children, and it's cheap enough to do that now. So we are seeing these changes happening quite quickly, and I think that we need to prepare for that and believe that the changes are happening so quickly that if we get ready for it, we can actually see it quickly. And because Africa is growing, the opportunities are there for you to leapfrog into that future, grab hold of it and just make it yours, and you can be leading the world.
Fantastic. Let me come back to you, Dora. Before that break, I was talking about the issue of electricity. We heard today that the South African electricity utility wants to increase tariffs, and the cost of electricity is high. Excess of water is also becoming a little bit expensive for the ordinary South African. In terms of creating a sustainability culture, how can it help us to deal with those issues of costing and that kind of thing, because that gets under people's skin?
Yes, unfortunately, in certain instances, it has to take some disaster or some unfortunate situation for people to act. And at the moment in South Africa, we are facing massive load shedding. Already it's become a norm that 6 p.m. every evening your lights will be off. So people are starting to realize that, and they're going towards alternatives. So we are seeing that the demand far outstrips the supply, and over and above that we get these increases in tariffs. So it's not just expensive, it's scarce now. So people are looking at alternatives, and as a city we would also advocate that, because we want to ensure security of supply. So we are looking at issues of embedded generation, especially.
What is embedded generation?
Okay, embedded generation is where, whether you are a business or an organization, let's say for a city now, we look at solar PV, solar energy generation, where we would power our own operations rather than pumping electricity to the grid, because we've got the national utility doing that, or we do not have an independent power producer agreement that can allow us to plug into the grid. So an organization can by itself generate renewable energy to power its own operations.
Do you think people can afford such operations? Is it affordable, as highlighted by Professor Peter Newman, that when you do it, sometimes it's a bit expensive?
Well, it's expensive. The capital costs could be quite high, mainly because we're talking about new technology. But like Prof has said, we've seen over the years that the prices have come significantly lower, and as more gets pumped into the market and more manufacturers come in, the prices would be even lower. So your startup costs would be high, but if you look at the long-term benefits, the running costs would be much less. So the challenge would be where you have that short-term kind of view, and unfortunately with most investment decisions you're looking at that short term, but if you look over 20 years and so forth, it would be much less, and we would see more challenges with grid electricity, especially with the delays that we are seeing with the new coal generation capacity that ESCOM has been working on. So we encourage such initiatives because we would like to lead a sustainable city. We would like to see more renewables being utilized within the city. So we would like to really diversify our energy mix. So we are partnering with private sector organizations to find solutions around it.
Sheila, let me come to you in terms of investors. I was listening to the radio this morning. Someone was saying, hey, South Africa is actually in a period where they're experiencing less investors because of just the climate of the country. We're having a few challenges in terms of just the economy. But another issue is this electricity issues, because some people are saying, hey, the the private sector is waiting and saying, hey, but this crisis, how do we deal with it? But I think my view is that shouldn't the private sector adapt more to these challenges and find their own ways of adapting to the economies within African cities?
I tend to have a similar view. What we've seen is that a number of private investors are really looking at turning this issue into a tangible opportunity. The really nice thing about renewable energy is the faster turnaround time versus your traditional nuclear or coal-fired power stations. The idea behind it is that when you take a coal or nuclear power station, it takes you about 10 to 15 years before you see return on investment. That's because you have to put in a significant amount of steel in the ground to build this up. There's quite a significant time difference when it comes to renewable energy, particularly solar. So there's quite an emphasis and focus on that at the moment. What we've also recently just completed a study or a market insight overview, and what we found is that South Africa, in terms of renewable energy investment, is leading the way as far as Africa goes, hands down. So we see that there's a fair amount of investment that's taking place. Globally, we're still lagging behind, and we see that the appetite is really growing for this. The more that we have a crisis, the more that we see load shedding, the more the investment opportunity is coming up more and more. There are downsides in the sense that it's not yet wholesale or large scale available to be able to feed back into the grid with Eskom. However, companies are still looking at this as opportunities. Last year, BMW made their own private investment as far as their Roseland facility goes to be able to ensure that they're not pulling out as far as manufacturing goes, but they're ensuring manufacturing takes place successfully here in South Africa. And that's just one typical example. We also see things in terms of, for example, CSIR's NCPC really focus on energy reduction to be able to actually support this. So we see a lot that's going on in terms of taking this issue and turning it into an opportunity. The appetite definitely seems to be there.
Come back to you, Professor Peter Newman, before we go to a break. In terms of looking at policy creation, I don't know what's happening internationally or in your country, but is there also a change in terms of how governments are adapting? I know we've been talking about the situation, excellent kind of programs that they're doing here, and just a great advancement in terms of how they've incorporated a green thinking within their way of governance. Do you see it as well in other parts of the world?
Sure. In November last year, China and America got together and said, we will not be the problem. They're the two biggest greenhouse producers in the world, and they basically could see that their countries were going very quickly towards this decarbonising their economies. So they announced that they will remove fossil fuels by the end of the 21st century and 80% by 2050. And then at the G7, where the wealthiest 80% of the world announced they would do that as well. Now, countries don't do that unless it's going to happen. Essentially, there aren't that many brave leaders out there who are going to be embarrassed by not producing that option. Yeah. So in my view, the trends are quite clearly there, and that's what I was presenting. You can see the trends happening, so the politicians everywhere are getting on board. So it's very important for South Africa to see that or the whole of Africa, to see that it can be part of that. It's not going to put them out of business. It's not going to upset the poor. This is the next generation, and you can be part of that.
You are listening to Channel Africa. The time right now is 11:32 Central African Time. I'm going to take one more break. When I come back is just to look at this idea that we posed yesterday, people-centric economies, people-centered ways of sustainability, not just for the private sector, not only just for the government's benefit, but how can me and you, ordinary people, because we've been speaking top-level government business, but how can me and you benefit from these structures? And how can we actually also adapt to these changing times, as highlighted by Professor Peter Newman. And you are listening to us right here on www.channelafrica.co.za. If you're streaming us live, thank you. All right, we have to come back. Thank you for joining us right here on the frequency 9625 kilohertz and the 31 meter band to Southern Africa. I think the idea of people-centricness has created a new conversation here. We just had a brief feedback from our guests. If you're just joining us, we've got Professor Peter Newman, who is the director at Curtin University Sustainability Policy Institute of the Curtin University. That's part of the Faculty of Humanities. We also have Jaishila Rajput, who is the founder and CEO of Tomorrow Matters Now, joining us as well. We have the Chief Sustainability Specialist. I like that. I want to be a Chief Sustainability Specialist one day in the office of the Tshwane Executive of the Mayor. Now, that is Dora Nteo. Now, I spoke about this idea of a people-centric way of doing things. How does it flow down to the ordinary person? Professor Newman, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I've just come back from India, where we've been working on a project called Deliberative Democracy and Sustainable Transport. Deliberative processes are where you get ordinary people involved in decision making. And I've been working on this for the last 30 years or so, because in my city they closed our railway down, and I helped to run a campaign that not only brought it back, but won 5 elections based on the fact that the people wanted to get more sustainable transport and not close down railways. and we showed them very clearly that would be the better future. So I believe very strongly that ordinary people know more about the future than most experts who are caught up in what has been and what is, and they can't see this longer term future. So in India, we got people to see what they can do about streets that are full of cars and pedestrians have no rights.
It's crazy there.
Yeah, crazy. And that, that wouldn't happen in Africa, would it? So in India...
in Nigeria, Lagos.
Yeah, of course. Look, it happens in every city.
Yeah.
And to get ordinary people together, along with all the stakeholders and the politicians, in the one room, and work it through to the point we actually all agree. And then the politicians say, oh yeah, we can fund that. And we were able to do that several times. And I do think that ordinary people, when they are brought together and given the chance to show what they think about the long-term future and how you can do it in steps, they are very, very good resource.
Fantastic. And your views there, Sheila, I know you had something to say about this idea of bringing it closer to the people.
Well, this is one of the things that we'll be talking about tomorrow, and the idea is beneficiation. So a lot of times when we look at topics associated with sustainability, we look at pockets in isolation as opposed to looking at it holistically. In South Africa, one of the big challenges that we have is job creation. And this is where I think with this concerted movement in terms of looking at sustainability holistically, we could be able to address quite a number of these challenges. There's a real opportunity to take a number of the things, for example, wasted resources, to be able to convert this into beneficiation industries, creating additional jobs, kind of alleviating some of the economic pressure. And I think part of what's happening at the moment, it kind of gets ordinary citizens actively involved. The classic example that we had mentioned earlier on is as far as the energy side goes. This is something where ordinary South Africans are being affected. But pretty soon we'll be talking about waste and water in exactly the same way. And that's what we're focusing on tomorrow, is the development of a waste economy, quite successfully, but not just in isolation, but together with beneficiation, meaning offshoot industries. And my final one on this is that in the Western Cape, there's a special economic zone just outside Cape Town in Atlantis that's actually focused and dedicated on the green economy as far as manufacturing goes. So there's a lot that's going on.
What are they doing there?
So what they've done is they've developed a special economic zone. So if there's any manufacturing associated with the green economy, it allows you to be able to manufacture there with special tax incentives, which is in turn driving a number of things in the green economy.
That's fantastic. It's a different way of doing business as well. Your views there, Dora, in terms of that kind of how do we reach people? I know we talked about this a little bit earlier about how you guys are doing it, but ultimately, how do we create that bridge between governments, between business to ordinary people? I mean, not withholding the idea that it is ordinary people who work in these businesses. It's ordinary people who actually need services from governments, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let me just start by picking up on a point that Professor Newman just raised, the issue around urban mobility and connectivity. I mean, if you were to go into the CBD of Tshwane at the moment, you'll see that it's a construction site. We call that Operation Reclaim. So over and above the bus rapid transit program that we are implementing, we are doing Operation Reclaim, mainly reclaiming the inner city core for our most precious resource, being our people. So we are moving private vehicles out of the inner city.
Great.
Yes, you get people that would complain before they get to see what the benefits are. So if you're sitting in the office of a mayor, one person comes in and say, I have nowhere to park in the CBD. And the next person comes and say, well, I have nowhere to walk. So what do you then prioritize? So in the interest of efficiency and emissions reductions and so forth, we are putting more pedestrian walkways, broadening the sidewalks and pedestrianizing most of the streets. And we ran a very good program in October last year. We called it Tshwane Green Ride because we want to encourage more non-motorized transport.
Okay. You're making me want to live in Tshwane, hey?
Yes, it would. So we want people to be able to ride a bicycle and we did a green ride from Mamelodi, one of the townships just in the east, into the CBD. It's about 30 kilometers. And we wanted to show that you can actually ride a bicycle from there into the CBD. We had the youngest cycler was 8 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, they rode the whole distance and back. No. And people are starting to see the excitement of it, that it's not just a sport, it's a way of connecting to a particular area. So that even fosters some social cohesion in doing that. So we are also seeing a lot of demand from the public. People are really realizing every day there's people coming into the office to say, look, I've got a great idea. I've got this great innovation. There's a lot of appetite out there. They are sitting and thinking about these things. And in most instances, what's encouraging is that it's the youth. Yeah. And what then frustrates you as a public sector official is that you can't immediately go out and help them. You don't have a legislative framework that allows you. This person says, well, I've got this technology, I've tested it, it can work, I want to get it onto the market. And there's this inertia because I am governed by a whole set of rules. Yes. So we try our best to really link up to possible businesses to assist in applying for funding and so forth. But we are quite encouraged by a lot of demand from the public side. They are sitting counseling, they are thinking about sustainability solutions. They are approaching us for those, and what's left for us to do on this side is to make it more simpler.
Well, I need to wrap it up, and I just want to wrap it up with a simple question. Where are we going in terms of the future? Let me start with you, Professor Newman, and then Jashila, and then you, Dora. Just in 30 seconds, where are we going in terms of the future when it comes to sustainability, Professor?
Well, I think it's going to be, in the next 30 years, the era for Africa to grow. We're already seeing that happening, and that opportunity that's created by growth has to be based around new technologies, new ways of building cities, because that's where it's all happening. And sustainable cities is quite clearly the big agenda.
Fantastic.
And your opportunity is there to grasp that and run with it.
Great. Jashila, where are we going in the future? Is there hope?
There is always hope. What I see is that I see a practical version of sustainability emerging for Africa. I see the issues that we're having really creating a true opportunity as far as sustainable innovation goes. And I see, as far as that goes, Africa having potential to lead the way, creating solutions that are benchmark solutions, particularly for other developing countries.
Dora, your views, just to wrap it up?
Yes, I'm quite excited about the future. We've got an empty canvas. We have greenfield development as African cities, and that's one of the reasons why we've convened African capital city mayors this week. So we are saying, let's leapfrog. And I think Prof. Newman mentioned it in his presentation yesterday, that we are not stuck. A lot of these developed cities, it's just, you go to New York City, it's a concrete slab. You come to Tshwane, you see so many empty patches of land. So we are going to utilize those green fields to make sure that we are creating a sustainable future. And it's not just for Tshwane, it's for all the cities in the continent.
Fantastic. Thank you to Dora Nteo, the Chief Sustainability Specialist in the Office of the Tshwane Executive and the Mayor. Thank you to Jashila Rajput, who's the founder of Tomorrow Matters Now. And thank you as well to Professor Peter Newman, the Director of the Curtin University Sustainability Policy Institute, part of the Faculty of Humanities of Curtin University. Thank you all for joining us on the program. Now back to